Anna Chiaretta Lavatelli. Pew,
Hello.
pew, pew. Hey, friend.
Hello, my dear.
Hello, my dear. You're my
How
dear.
are you?
How are you? Well, how are you?
I'm great.
Great. Everything's fine.
Cruising through to the final weeks of preparation.
Everything's fine. Nothing is stressful at all.
Nothing.
It's
No,
fine.
we're fine.
So, Anna Chiaretta Lavatelli, let's kind of introduce you to our tens of followers. And tell us where you are
Yeah,
currently, where you're
currently.
from, maybe your little
Yeah,
journey, and then we'll start talking
sure.
all about your mind.
Oh, the crazy brain that,
Yeah.
that evolved over all those years.
Yeah.
Well, shoot, let's see. I was born in Dallas, Texas,
Oh boy.
but I grew up in Buffalo, New York, where thanks to the uh, uh, unforgivable pandemic, I have returned to Buffalo, which is actually where I did my undergraduate studies. So it's a great place for media artists.
Yeah.
Actually, there's an amazing program at University of Buffalo that I went through, media studies and film and video, and a lot of great organizations supporting the arts and media tech practice that I'm excited to be close to again. So it's been kind of the perfect place to be working on this project from.
And affordable rent.
And affordable rent, Buffalo, New
Yeah.
York. Don't tell anyone. We always talk about it as a secret. Don't come to Buffalo. It's
Right? There's been
terrible.
this boom. Everybody's like moving to like
The house
Las
market.
Vegas and Florida and Iowa. Now
Getting
suddenly
weird.
nobody can afford to live there. What?
Speaking of places I would love to live but haven't been able to afford to return to is San Diego. So I did my graduate study, got my MFA at UC San Diego, where I met you and so many fabulous collaborators and friends and creative brains. And I think that program was such a great complement to the whole media studies thing because it was this very unstructured art program.
Mm-hmm.
And I I don't know where I fit in the world as an artist or creative person because I am just interested in stuff and I will use what makes sense to be used to share an
Yeah.
idea or dump my brain out into the world. And
Do you
so
think
I've basically been moving around sort of, I feel like sponging up the world around me.
do you think that UCSD is kind of unique? I was trying to to articulate that to someone who, in the opera world, you go to Puccini school, you learn Puccini, Mozart, Verdi, and
Yeah.
occasionally others, and never anything newer than like the '60s. But like the arts graduate school program at UCSD, I feel like maybe it's just because we went through it and it was like special and weird and horrible
Felt
and
wonderful to
wonderful.
us.
But yeah, it was that I feel like that's something that's kind of unique.
Yeah,
This like interdepartmental like smushing and blurring and everybody just kind of does everything and you
super interdisciplinary.
yeah.
And that was why I chose, I mean, I had a few other options on the
Mhm.
table, but every other, in the similar, like in the art space, it's like, oh, Cal Arts or Columbia or, one of these schools that cranks out Yale cranks out really successful artists is like where you should go as an artist to have a important career, whatever that means.
Whatever.
And I just, it didn't do it for me. I was so excited by the messiness of UCSD. And I remember when someone was asking me like the difference between various programs, because I had visited a few when I was trying to decide where to go. And I said, the thing about it is if you've had enough school and you really just want to dive deep into ideas and making, this is the place to do it
Yeah.
because it's this hyper supportive, definitely academic environment, but it's not constricting in any way. Like
Right.
it felt like the most well-supported 3-year residency of my life.
Yeah.
And yes, we had to teach, but all of those things were fuel.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
And
like equal parts like, Susan Sontag in the morning and like let's just sort of play for like an hour and see what happens and just sort of like make a big old mess and like dunk our heads in fish tanks and smear things on mirrors and like let's You know, it was just this
use our
weird...
bodies to learn
Yeah.
and do stuff. Yeah, totally. Well, and I think that they made the like greatest move ever when they put the new music building across from visual arts. Because it was like, let's take the two wildest, because I joked, I was like, yeah, we don't do performance art at the art department. You gotta look across the street to the music school because the music department performance stuff is off the chain.
Yeah.
They make us look like amateurs. It was such a, and I think also we were in a really special time where our program had such a huge age range and experience background range, and people who had had so many previous lives. And that was the other thing that was, it wasn't like, oh, we're gonna like go participate in the art market. Like, what? Who? We're gonna do stuff that we're excited about. And that, and that's sort of always how, I don't know, I thought this is probably why I'm like, whatever, I don't know, like how to call myself. I'm like, I'm an artist filmmaker. I don't know. I guess. I'm not big on labeling and categories.
You wear too many hats to be able to do that though, too, you know? So yeah, you're an artist filmmaker. Whatever. Do you have like a shrug emoji next to your bio? I guess.
I do stuff. I like things, images and movement. Yeah.
Well, so speaking of the UCSD, so the first piece of yours that I ever saw was the most stupid Meet Your Mirror that you filmed for composers Clinton McCallum and Robert Pierzak, very serious composers of Western art music. So that was like my first sort of like, oh. She likes really bright and like kind of garish things sometimes, and she likes the way that bodies are positioned, and she likes to make things like kind of grotesque and really absurd and and like really brightly colored. And candy. That was like my first kind of dive into the world of Anna.
Well, and that was a Mickey Anna Face piece, actually. It was a Mickey Davis Anna collabo. That makes sense. Shout
out to Mickey Davis.
Mariquita Davis, brilliant. Yeah, she was such a good collaborator. We did the church piece together that was working title last year. Yes.
Which is hilarious.
On high to college.
Heading off to collab up there. There they go. It's really good. So like, was that, I guess so when did you come to UCSD?
It was summer of 2008. Yeah. And so I tried to leave San Diego in 2011 after I finished and just came running right back. And that's, it was like not that long. It was like a year or two after I came back that we started working on Vanity Run Amok.
Yeah. Oh, well, yes, we'll get to that. So I wanted to talk about...
Oh, the pink. Yes. Speaking of 2011.
2011. Yeah. So then, so I saw you do Meet Your Mirror, and then this thing happened, and it kind of changed my life a little bit. So I was like, I remember kind of sitting in... I mean, it was a rickety ass room, this made of like really perfectly cheap, like theater flats, right? And so you can,
it was standard drywall, like the thinnest drywall you could buy.
Yeah.
The cheapest 2x4s we could get our hands on.
Structurally sound.
Does it matter? It was. I worked with some very young people who seemed smart. I think the thing that was so beautiful about how rickety it was because we built the room over and over again. And so we would take, so this room that Leslie's describing, it's 3 walls and a floor, all standard, sort of, what is it? It's a 8-foot 2x4 construction. So we built our wall frames and put cheap drywall on, and these two girls behind Leslie, Alexis and Izzy, painted the room pink. And we started doing a series of like performance experiments in this room where we would talk about what it was to be a teenager and sort of teenagers lying in their room. And then I started working with the choreographer. But the thing was, we didn't have I didn't have a studio that big to build an 8-foot by 8-foot room over and over again. So we would build it. I would reserve space in the gallery, which is where it was exhibited in the end. But we built it at least 4 times.
Oh my God.
One of those times was building it for Meet Your Mirror, painting it
right.
purple. For Meet Your Mirror, and then painting it pink again. To keep doing the pink room project, because I was sort of like, why not? I labor intensive set stuff seems to be my secret jam. It's very meditative. And I'm like, oh, it's worth it because the shot's going to be so amazing.
Because it's going to look amazing, and it did.
And it did. And then the room became part of the installation, so that the projections of the girls performing in the room weren't seen until you had to go through the room yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the girls were they in the room during the installation? Did I remember that correctly?
There, we had a lookalike.
Just garden variety teenager.
No, there was because Izzy was able to come to the opening night, like the big event night, and Izzy did monitor the room for the sort of end hurrah of the show, but. There was this other young woman who, oh my God, I feel so badly. I'm blanking on her name. But she was like her role was the guardian, because my main thing was these are underage young girls. I didn't like the idea that somebody might enter the gallery and look at them wrong.
Yeah.
Like there needed to be somebody in the room guarding their image.
Yeah.
And what better person than a teenage girl who can glare at you and make you feel bad about yourself. Yeah. And it was amazing because after one shift, and I would check in on her like, every hour because I was so worried she would be uncomfortable or someone would make her uncomfortable. And so it was this very I was obsessively monitoring the situation. And everybody's parents were involved. It was all very we wanted to make sure everyone felt safe and good, and that the project was doing what it intended to do, which was to provide them a space of play to be in their bodies freely. And so anyways, by day 2, she was like, I get it. This is really cool. And I was like, oh dear. And so there was like this space where I could hide out and watch people watch the piece. And it was like that mean girl gaze she would give. Yeah. And she just made you feel like, oh, I'm not supposed to be
crossed
here.
The line. I gotta
go. But it was great because she protected them. And that was the whole point, was I wanted someone to always be protecting their image.
I mean, that is the sort of underlying thing in the piece anyway, right? That the very fact that they have bodies, and that those kinds of bodies have been sexualized and put on this pedestal as the thing that we all as adults should try to obtain in our own bodies as females. It's just sort of towing this line between totally like mundane and boring, just a bunch of girls just sort of like their bored carcasses laying on the floor, or brushing their hair, or like futzing with like all this
the pink garbage,
the pink detritus.
Yes.
It was very mundane, but the fact that they have female bodies, they're inhabitants of female bodies of a certain age, made it feel a little bit dangerous, and made it feel like I shouldn't be watching them. This is private, which was really very, very, very good. It's my art critic analysis. It was really good. I liked it.
Well, and the whole thing, like the writing behind it, the title of the essay, the thesis was Pink Without Pleasure, because this whole idea that our sexualization, as adults, as a society, our sexualization of them robs them of their capacity for pleasure.
Right.
because we're feeding their own image back to them and creating the idea that the being an image, being beautiful is pleasure. And so they have been denied their own bodies, which is really tragic.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you got it. You understood.
I get it, you know. And then the use of Britney Spears is always just like near and dear to my heart. I want to send her a package of this piece because it's so much like, it's so driven by, you know, especially with recent events and Free Britney, and I obsessively follow her on Instagram, and I'm like, oh gosh, I feel like she would really appreciate this piece now. And not sue me for work, you know, chopped and screwing the tracks. Yeah, exactly. That took me a minute. The soundtrack of The Room is that Britney Spears' music, early music, it was her first record, was being kind of like
slowed down and chopped up. So
it took me a minute when I heard a baby, but it was like, oh, baby. It was very disturbing. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So you know, your grad school oeuvre was like sort of candy technicolor, bright and garish, and about the sort of about positioning the female body as the object, and how the female body as an object can mean like a million things to a million people, but it never ever means what it should mean to the person. So how did we come from this landscape to the one that is behind you, eyeballs and trees and
HARAWI?
HARAWI.
Yeah, I mean, I think Vanity Run Amok is part of that story, but I think it was sort of moving past maybe, I don't want to get too like psychoanalytical about it, but moving past, you know, images of childhood trauma, right?
Yeah.
And sort of the basis with which like my own identity is constructed and other people's, you know, who can identify with the Pink Room, that space, and sort of looking at, okay, and what now? Also, I think like since 2011, like in the past 10 years, like we as a society have been openly confronting, especially in the past few years, identity in a really much more impactful way, as opposed to, I mean, like even looking back to the 80s, the way we reprocess our image. I mean, I started out like most video artists using myself and my own image as a tool to, you know, and I think it was very much a UB thing, University of Buffalo, where I did my undergrad. It was just like, oh, of course, yeah, we perform and we use our own bodies in our video art. And it's of that 70s narcissistic, you know, like, now I'm like Carolee Schneemann, you know, this whole Abramovich, exactly, Joan Jonas, and all this early video art that was, you know, Cindy Sherman, I mean, who from Buffalo, you know, Buff State.
I love her.
She was hugely influential on me because I knew she went to Buff State. Like she's like from, like she founded the gallery where my mom works, Hall Walls. And so it was just like, she was always sort of like part of the landscape in my creative experience. And so of course I used myself, and of course I did like early video art based on her film stills. Because it was the idea of identity and representation was so interesting, but that, you know, it's like, it's kind of goofy now. And so I think it's for me been this process of like unpacking moving image and the idea of projecting oneself into the world and integrating into the images of the world. And, you know, I think it's much more witchy and, you know, about space-time portals. No. But yes, it is. It is. It's about this idea of film representing a moment, and this idea of, you know, artist as, some kind of, like, I'm going to use witch because that's like culturally what makes sense, Salem, blah blah blah. But you could call shaman, you could use all these different terms from all these different cultures, but this idea of capturing, documenting through our senses experiences, and mine is video and film, and that these moving images conjure things and people. And in the way, Pink Room was a spell to conjure a memory of bodiliness and having your bodiliness taken away from you. And so it's gotten more abstract and more conceptual, I guess. I don't know. And I'm still figuring it out as I'm making it. That's the sort of beauty of it, is I'm letting myself play again with
Well,
what
yeah,
an image
I mean,
is.
it's you've got a source material too, right? So, the other, all of anything that you have done that is your own personal work has been your own personal work, right? So you are the source and the output.
Right, and this is very much in dialogue.
Yeah, this is someone else's idea, and to start with, and that idea is problematic, right? So it is
Yes.
a white French man who is taking ideas from the Quechua language and this myth of Peruvian peoples, native peoples, and not really crediting it to them. And it feels very, it's very exoticism at its sort of base level. So how do you take this in peace? And I've been kind of grappling with it. I like it because it's really fun to sing, and it's really hard. And it's like, if I can really do it well, then it's like, oh shit,
awesome. Yeah.
they can do that. But it's thematically, the story itself is a little problematic. So how are you addressing or ignoring or
and I think
that as a launch pad and going someplace else?
We talked about it early on, because when you first talked to me about doing this piece, I was like, oh, I remember that one. And then sort of thought, oh yeah, I've been really, because at the time I was living in Mexico City and really deep diving into this idea of alternative modes of seeing and unpacking the history of Mexico through the different gazes of the hundreds of communities that were colonized by the Spanish, and how those modes of seeing the world and experiencing the world were denied for so long. And that, in filmmaking, there's all these beautiful films being made in Mexico. And so I thought, oh yeah, I can, it's this guy who's European who's jamming on, indigenous culture. And then I'm like, he's not jamming on it. And so as I, dove into it, I was like, no, it has nothing to do with that language. Instead, it's about looking at this classic story of young love and young sacrifice, Romeo and Juliet, and then Tristan and Isolde. And it's a trope. In every culture has some young people who kill themselves to do something dramatic. Like hopefully
it's
open
the
a space
like door slam. It's like, I'm going to my room.
Yes. And so in that, it aligned with all of the adolescent research I had done in the past. And I thought, you know what, this is not, it's about my own gaze, right? Like, I'm not going to touch these other things. It's about me exploring ways of looking and ways of projecting identity into space, because through their love death, they're projecting their identities into sort of this space-time magic, right? And it's much more about an acid trip as opposed to something too literal. And so I stepped back and into this language of sort of abstract, like, rather than looking at the teenager being the teenager, sort of projecting oneself into space and time, and making it a lot more about the music, because the music is amazing.
The music is amazing.
As you know, as
Yeah.
ill-founded as interests may have been.
Yeah.
The
I
piece of
mean,
music is really impressive.
it is very, very, very good. It is,
And
yeah.
you know, and it's been, you know, it's not something I feel like I've done a lot of, this kind of like figuring out how to collaborate my visual image with music. And so it's been this really interesting struggle to figure out what's the right balance, because I mean, we say this, I feel like every other call, like, well, but it's not, we can't let this become a music video, right? And this is the problem with video and music, is they, you know, have a habit
They
of
have a
trying
history.
to do some things together. And
Well,
so
yeah, we'll talk about that. Yeah. So what do you? So we talk about this all the time, that it's not a music video. It's not trying to sort of like yeah, I don't know. It's hard
visualize.
yeah, it's not to literally visualize what is happening, but like what does the role of video, and how are you considering the role of video and projection and how, and it's
Yeah.
got a live performance element to it. So how, you know, like how does the live body and the projected image, and like what sorts of,
Yeah.
how do you even tackle that? How do they work
Work
together or not?
Well, yeah, and I think that's it. Finding that balance where the imagery can add, sort of just like almost putting a prism in front of the piece, so that it's not trying to tell you what the piece is, or tell you how to be with the piece, or how to hear anything, but that it just puts a little prism in front of the lens, so that you're opening it up a little, and it gets a little more like, oh yeah, that,
Yeah.
this is very unusual, like
Yeah.
to let this, to take you on this the teenager's acid trip, to take you into a space that's very other, and to shatter time and space, because so much for me, so much of the piece was the way in which this, you know, violent love death opens up perception, and that it's cosmic and atomic simultaneously. And happens to be something I'm very interested in, atomic energy right now. And so it got very like, it just exploded for me. And it was like, of course, this is about that shattering. And that video is, you know, it's just moving image. It's just a way of remembering something or misremembering something. And so how do we use video to sort of, yeah, I can't think of a better word, but it's like a little kaleidoscope or prism on our understanding of what is happening.
Yeah.
So
I think that is kind of brilliant, Anna.
Me, smart. No, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, atomic energy is super interesting stuff.
Yeah, you're talking about, I mean, I guess that's sort of where our histories also kind of collide, right? So your grandfather was a physicist, right?
Yes.
And he worked on splitting the U, which whatever
235.
Yeah, 235. And I'm from my father is from Las Vegas, and I kind of claim sort of Las Vegas as my home, though I was born in South Texas. But my dad was there when they were like testing just outside of the city, and so we have this weird, I have an obsession with the Miss Atomic USA pageant, and
right.
you know, this is sort of another place where
it's super, yeah, and there's something there in that. I was just I'm not a huge, well, just because it's a public, I'm not a huge fan of Timothy Morton, but I was reading Hyperobjects, and I really loved this articulation of sort of the various markers of the ends of the world, and that Trinity in 1945, this very first explosion that my grandfather witnessed and participated in the creation of, was a moment of the beginning of the end. Yeah. It forever changed the way our own atoms are. Like
Yeah.
the fact that our honey is nuclear now. I don't know if this is,
What?
there's traces of radioactivity in all American honey. It's in every, like we forever changed our fabric.
Yeah.
As a species, which is, and not just our own species, all species. This world has been altered. And it's also super, like there's so much writing and film production, television production happening around this sort of folding of time, right? Like everyone has become obsessed with this idea of, you know, the multiverse and multidimensionality. And it's kind of funny because it's all right here in HARAWI as well, right? Like our human consciousness is just, it's this constant folding. And that maybe this atomic moment did something to make us sort of see our collective energies in a different way. I don't know.
With that. Well, my darling, thank you for taking my morning, your late morning, afternoon, to
my
chat
brunch.
with me, your brunch. I am so excited.
I'm so excited
that you are vaccinated and are coming to be in person to share your amazing surreality, your own sort of cosmic presence with our audience, and mostly just with me. I'm mostly excited that I get to see you.
Me too.
And sing all over you. Yeah, so I'm so looking forward to it. So Anna, thank you for taking the morning, and
yeah, I'm just so excited. We're gonna do great stuff.
We're gonna. Bye.
Bye.